Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about new Zelda projects releasing in 2022, my thoughts on Breath of the Wild 2 being delayed, and more Zelda news and rumors. One I have been asked the most about is this quote from Samus Hunter, who, from my knowledge and research, has been correct on almost everything. Some do claim she is always wrong, which just isn't true, and others claim she steals leaks from other people, which, when I've asked, no one has been able to show me proper evidence of. With that said, I don't know if her info is from other people, but I do know it is correct, almost all the time. The quote, she says, "A Zelda project will be released this year as always, as there are other titles in development, but, right now, the plans are still late 2022 release, and if a delayed happened, they would announce it around April, May, because that's the period for the new financial year projections." First, yes, I've said this so many times I can feel our longtime viewers becoming annoyed when I say it, but there are always people watching who just believe Nintendo only works on a single Zelda game at a time. Some even ask me if Breath of the Wild 2 is taking so long, why did Nintendo delay it to work on Skyward Sword HD? So, to clear this up, Nintendo at all times has 4, 5, or more Zelda games in development at a time. We have other videos covering this in more detail with interviews from Aonuma, Miyamoto, Fujibayashi, and others at Nintendo to confirm this. But, to cover this quickly, Tantalus worked on Skyward Sword HD and Twilight Princess HD, Grezzo worked on almost every 3DS Zelda game and Link's Awakening, and are currently working on a new Zelda game. Some, including myself, believe they have actually recently finished a Zelda game and begin working on another. I also want to point out that Grezzo alone has worked on 3 or 4 Zelda games at a time. Nintendo themselves have confirmed they had been working on an unknown 2D Zelda game with a dedicated 2D Zelda team. Monolith Soft now have their own official Zelda team. Koei Tecmo works on the Hyrule Warriors series, which I believe will be getting a third title and possibly more DLC for Age of Clams, or at least certain updates closer to Breath of the Wild 2's release. We have that elusive cell phone game, and spin-offs like Cadence of Hyrule, which could be developed by almost anyone Nintendo offers the opportunity to. I think whatever Grezzo has been holding off on is more than ready to be announced and released. I'm still thinking Ocarina of Time HD, but part of me thinks it would be the perfect game to launch alongside Nintendo's next console. And yes, I know there are people out there who thinks Nintendo Switch is the last console Nintendo will ever release, and they have absolutely no plans to release any other console ever. As for Tantalus, they usually take 18 months or 2 years to develop and release their Zelda remakes, whereas Grezzo is much quicker, usually. As for Wind Waker HD, it took Nintendo less than 6 months with a small team, so a simple port of it for Switch or even Twilight Princess HD wouldn't take long at all. And I honestly believe these are games Nintendo already ported long ago, when they were in that phase of porting literally every big Wii U game to Switch, as these two would take anywhere from 1 to 3 months for a small team, and Nintendo is just holding off on the actual release, which is something they have confirmed they have done for games in the past. Nintendo does usually release at least 1 Zelda game or remake per year, sometimes up to 3 or more get released within a year of each other, if we count new games, spin-offs, and remakes. So yes, I 100% believe this part of the rumor. Now, a lot of you have asked on almost every episode of our Zelda podcast, the Highland Gamescast, is Breath of the Wild 2 being delayed? And that question goes right alongside this quote from Samus Hunter. As some of you may know, Daniel keeps me locked in his basement, and we know no one who works on the Zelda series at all, especially since Daniel embarrassed himself a few weeks ago during his dinner with Miyamoto. Use your imaginations on what he did and leave your guesses in the comments below. The winner will get a Valentine's Day hug from Daniel. Sadly, Breath of the Wild 2 didn't appear at the Nintendo Direct, and it wasn't even mentioned, whereas last year's February Direct, Nintendo at least confirmed more information would be coming later in the year. Personally, I believe we will get a big blowout for Breath of the Wild 2 at E3's digital event. Yes, it is digital this year, though Nintendo's presentations have been digital basically since the Wii U released 10 years ago. I think Nintendo will treat this even bigger than they did the original Breath of the Wild during its E3 event and Treehouse segments. For those who don't remember, they released what felt like dozens of behind-the-scenes videos, interviews, and more about the game while having several hours of gameplay from their Nintendo Treehouse team. Whether this happens at E3 and the Treehouse that always happens immediately after their big E3 directs, or during an event of its own, I expect a lot to be revealed this year, with one of the biggest promotional events Nintendo has done for a Zelda game. At least, a lot more than what they did for Age of Clams, which released a month after its announcement, which happened during a simple tweet on Twitter. Is there a chance it gets delayed? Yes, there's a chance almost anything could happen, but I'm willing to bet my imaginary cat, Fluffy, that Breath of the Wild 2 will release this year. In the last few financial reports, including the most recent, Nintendo has kept Breath of the Wild 2 listed as releasing in 2022 without change, and this year has always been what Nintendo was saying, though it is possible for it to be delayed. With the original Breath of the Wild, they would usually come out and be upfront about it being delayed, with each trailer, announcement, or whatever they had planned for it. With this sequel, that hasn't been the case. If there's anything else that you would like me to talk about or discuss, or you would like Kayla, the Geek Apprentice, Daniel, or I to discuss on our Highland Gamescast, please comment them below, and we will do our best to cover any pieces of news, rumors, leaks, upcoming games, or anything that you find interesting. Thank you for watching, and we might be having one of our friends who worked on Breath of the Wild and Age of Calamity coming on our Highland Gamescast sometime this month. Now, I want to give a thank you to our special Patreon supporter 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who purchased a Game Over Jessie shirt. If you purchase one, you can also get a shout out at the beginning or end of our next video, and once again on our podcast, with us reading out any message or question you choose for us. Links to purchase one yourself are in the description. We have a few new Patreon supporters that I would like to give a thank you to. If you would like your own shout out, then head over to patreon.com/GameOverJessie, where you can receive a ton of different rewards while helping us out. Those of you who are just donating a single $1, that really does help more than you would think. Thank you Monica Spath, NORNARB, Shadow to Us, SOBERX, ANDREMOI, NATSU, Rusty Caulfield, Zoey M, Candy, David Guthman, Ashton Wren, BKRS7, Blargnar, Chad Costin, Gus Calvo, Henry, Jesse Birch, Jesse Wood, Jon Snow, Larulian Sheep, Lovable Christie, Mr. Monocled Metroid, Super NX64, and ZAIN.